Welcome back to another episode of the Casey Campbell Podcast. Casey Campbell with you, of course, and we are pleased to be joined by the one and only Tim Brando of Fox Sports, and of course has covered college football, college basketball for many, many years. Timmy B, how's it going?
Well, Casey, this when you get to be my age, you're going to have friends and colleagues and coaches that you grew up idolizing to some extent when you were young, and then you got to meet and you got to cover as a broadcaster as you grew into the business. And we're losing a lot of them now, and the one we lost yesterday, Bobby Bowden, is probably for me the most significant of all the losses. And that's saying something because I thought a lot of Pat Dye. I think we all had great relationships with guys like Pat.
Yeah.
And there are countless others that we've lost in recent years, football and basketball.
Yeah.
That touched our hearts when we were coming up in the industry. But Bobby was someone that I met when I was 24 years old in 1979, 1980. And as a young broadcaster at that time in Baton Rouge, thinking he might be coming to LSU to replace Charlie McClendon, it turned out that he didn't take the job. It was offered, but he felt like he had won a key game to beat them in Baton Rouge and had a tough schedule for 81 that he thought that if he could get through that, he could build something monumental at Florida State, which he went on to do. So to have followed that and gotten to know his family so well, and Terry is my age, and he recently came to my alma mater, and I was one of those working behind the scenes to hopefully get Terry the job. Back in January, Bobby and Miss Ann and Tommy all came to the formal announcement, which I emceed. So we've remained very, very close through the years. I did a number of interviews with him on my summertime series, Football Saturdays. A lot of it's out there now on the internet. People are looking at it. I've noticed quite a few hits on the interview I did with him back in 2013 out in Okaloosa Island at his summer home right off 30A. Just so many memories. I talked to him a little over a week ago, and because Terry had told me about a month ago that he was terminal and he wasn't going to be with us very long. So, but he was always upbeat, and he was always, "Hey boy, I'm feeling all right. Good to hear you," and would tell stories, and he'd want me to tell stories and do my impression of him, which he always got a big kick out of. So, we're celebrating his life today. We are.
Yeah.
But you can't, as a human being, losing someone of that ilk is tough. And I think in a large way, it's because of what a great man he was in so many facets of life, not just a football coach that was the winningest coach at Division I level for such a long time. It's more about what he did for so many people, not just his players, but his players especially. He did so much for them, but he did so much for so many others that people have no idea of. So I think it's the combination of that. Plus, hey, I'm 65, just like his son Terry, and it's a reminder that those guys that were up here that we were looking at, they're gone. So our mortality is something that we think a lot more of when we lose people like that. And so that's just a human quality that all of us, I think, have to face.
Mm-hmm. So I know you've covered the ACC for a long time. What did he do for Florida State football and maybe Florida State in general?
Well, I'd like to take it beyond that, what he did for college football in total. And I've said this to a number of people already this morning that I've joined, and you were one of many that were calling me yesterday, and I'm happy to oblige, because that's a good way to celebrate his life and to honor his life. there's no one in the history of the game that built a program from nothing and was more effective than Bobby Bowden. When he took over for Jim Carlin at West Virginia, Jim Carlin had an outstanding season, and I want to say they'd won maybe 10 games. So when Bobby took over, West Virginia was, it was a solid program, and he was just trying to maintain a level of success. And in the early years at West Virginia, going 9-3 wasn't that hot. It's like, hey, Bobby, you got to do better than that. And then when he got to Florida State, that was originally a women's teachers college.
Yeah.
And Peterson had been there and had done somewhat okay, but not great. Bobby decided, I'm going to build something really big here. I think because of the nucleus of players and the geography of Tallahassee being in the state capital, he thought, wow, we could make this thing special. And he used LSU as the program that he wanted to emulate. He started playing games at night in primetime. Primary reason for that was he wanted to play at a different time in Florida. Florida was the big kahuna in the state. And if their games were on at the same time, no one would listen on the radio. So he loved the fact that LSU in the state capital of Louisiana played at night. They had a 50,000 watt station that was carrying the games, WWL, and people could hear all across the country those games. He thought it could help build the program. And he started in with the notion that he could turn Doak Campbell into a really house of horrors. Yeah. And Doak Campbell was, it was a playground compared to what it is today, what he made it. To do that as a Southern Independent, he had to schedule, he had an unbelievable road schedule. And they were 4-for-1 games with people like Ohio State, Pitt when they were really good, Notre Dame, LSU, Nebraska. He said once, I played 5 homecoming games on the road. Not one of them was mine. No one would be able to do that today. And that was just to attract attention to get into the ACC, and going into the ACC really impacted, I think, not only his program for the fact that he could win a championship beyond just going to an Orange Bowl or going to a potential national championship opportunity. He really knew that the direction of college football was such that to get a schedule that was manageable, he needed to be in a conference because he was playing these, like I said, 4-for-1, 5-for-1 games to help fund his program. He was funding the Florida State football program in the same manner that, say, his son would be at ULM playing money games. Okay. People tend to forget that. You think Florida State, you think big behemoth power conference school. No, when he took it over, he was like it would be complimentary to say he was playing the role of Boise State years ago, or name that FBS, group of 5 school. That's really what he was trying to do. That would be who you compare Florida State to. So, and he was actually very candid years later when the SEC was looking to expand in the 90s, and they wound up getting South Carolina and Arkansas in 92. They really wanted to get Florida State, and Bobby was like, what? He said, why would I want to play? Why would I want to play in the SEC? He says, I'm playing Florida now. I'm playing Miami now. Why would I want to play in the SEC? No, thank you. I think I'll just stay right where I am. I've got a better chance to hold up. If I want to hold up that crystal at the end of the year, I got a better chance in the ACC. And some people in the SEC have used that.
Yeah.
Okay, to make themselves feel better, but in truth, he was just being honest. And it was a candid, honest answer that not many coaches would normally give, but he always did.
Yeah. You talk about the story of Florida State and how they got into these conferences and stuff. It kind of relates to what's kind of going on right now with teams moving conferences and merging conferences and super conferences and all that. So it kind of relates to that in a way with that. But overall, there's a new landscape of college football, just as one was there back in the 90s and now in the, 10 years ago. And now there's about one to be happening right now with Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC. What do you think about all these teams moving conferences and all that fun stuff?
Well, look, we're on the precipice of a transformational era in college football, and it was bound to happen.
Right.
It was sped up, I think, by a couple of things. One, NIL,
Yep.
and the Supreme Court ruling was 9-0 in favor of the NIL, and the NCAA at that point just admitted, hey, we can't handle this. This is too big for us. It's up to you guys. So conference commissioners, I think, were at that point basically on the clock. How are you going to handle all that's in front of you, with the understanding that moving forward, the players are going to get some of that. And the best way to do that is to get as many big time needle moving programs into your conference. So Greg Sankey just decided, hey, the strong are the ones that survive. So I'm going to do what I have to do. And, that's the only conference in college football where the membership doesn't have a grant of rights. The SEC is not needed a grant of rights. Why would you need a grant of rights when you're the top conference giving out the most money to your member institutions? So they were like, we're moving on. And Oklahoma and Texas, I think Texas more so than Oklahoma, felt like, this is our opportunity to cash in for the long haul. Okay. And Texas decided that this was something that they really, really needed. And Oklahoma, I think, along for the ride, also made a good long-term decision for themselves. Now it's up to the rest of the conference commissioners to, checkmate, Greg Sankey's check. In a game of chess in sports business, that's what we're looking at right now. And I don't think it's necessarily bad for college football. I'm not one of these doomsayers that thinks that suddenly when toe meets leather in September, everyone's going to view the game differently. Tribalism will take over once the games start and this kind of conversation comes to an end, and it's just about winning on Saturdays.
Yeah.
College football will be as great and as popular as it always has been. And I certainly believe that advancing the college football playoff to 12 teams is going to be magnificent. Now, this move is probably going to be put on hold for a little while longer until everything shakes out. I think most of the movers and shakers in college football are now going to suggest we need to wait until we see who winds up where before we crank up a new system in our postseason. So, but that's what I make of it, and I don't think it's all bad. I think it's just going to take a little getting used to from a lot of fans out there.
What happens to the Big 12, you think?
Well, it's a great question. That's the first. I think that's what we're all waiting to see before we determine what's going to go on elsewhere.
Yeah.
Okay. Can Bob Bowlesby protect the 8 remaining schools? And if the 8 remaining schools are smart, they will hold firm and hold steady and not jump ship, because again, the business end of college football is not something a lot of fans necessarily keep up with. I'm playing golf on Saturdays and Tuesdays and Thursdays at home, and some of my friends we very rarely talk sports business, or guys are always, my buddies know I try to get away from that when I'm playing golf.
Yeah.
But after rounds, when we go to the 19th hole, I mean, they have to ask me. It's just, and when I start throwing around the numbers financially that these schools are getting because of what league they're in, their jaws drop to the floor. They don't keep up with that. Fans don't have to keep up with that.
No.
So it amazes them. And by example, I've heard this noise about West Virginia and the ACC. Well, why would West Virginia take a $14-15 million cut to join the ACC? The ACC football payout is about $22 million per school.
Yeah.
Okay. The Big 12 is $15 million more than that.
Right.
And that contract's got to be honored until 2025 if those schools stay in play, and I have a sense that with Oklahoma and Texas making this move, the quest for the other 8 is to hang in there and basically play truth or dare with Oklahoma and Texas. Hey, you're under contract till 2024 through the 2024 season. We don't plan on going anywhere, so you're not either, unless you want to pay $80 million each of you to get out. If that happens, Texas and OU both pay that. That's $160 million.
Yeah.
That the Big 12 has to work with. And now you really do have to move. If you're one of those 8 schools, you have to be thinking about what can we do to bolster our teams. That's when Bob Bowlesby has to go to work. He's got to have teams in play that he believes he can cobble together. Whether it's 2 or 4, I'm not sure. But that's what it's going to take to keep the Big 12 viable.
Yeah.
But I don't see a team out there that brings you the brand that either Texas or OU brought.
Right.
But you can still get quality teams to keep your league together. That's the thing. The super conference concept, whether the Big Ten decides to add teams or doesn't, if the Big Ten just strikes a scheduling coalition with the Pac-12, which I think would be a great idea, that would enhance their rights, in my opinion, for whoever the broadcaster is that claims their rights. And that deal is up in 23. So that's the first television negotiation to come up, is the Big Ten, which obviously I work for the company that has the top deal with the Big Ten right now, Fox. ESPN has the secondary deal. But they are so invested now in the SEC. I'm not sure how much room, even with all the networks they have, that they may have for all of the Big Ten. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with that new Big Ten deal when that takes place. But I think that we could still see some movement, whether it's through scheduling coalitions or maybe something more than that from the Big Ten. The Big 12 is the first to react because they lost the 2 teams, but the first to have to negotiate a television contract is the Big Ten.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, you look at, you have all these different teams, and the 8 teams that got to stick together. And West Virginia going to the ACC, Kansas rumored to go to the Big Ten, and all that fun stuff. And it's just really interesting to look at and see.
Well, it's got, the leagues have to find value, though. They got to find value. West Virginia to the ACC makes geographic sense, but do they bring value to the ACC? Would they be able to attract more revenue, or would they just be splitting up what revenue you have left? John Swofford, the commissioner of the ACC, is a dear friend, someone that I got to know very well, and I enjoyed calling his basketball tournament and his basket and games for a number of years. He so wanted a cable network, and his presidents of his university so wanted a cable network to compete with the SEC that ESPN finally caved to that notion and said, okay, well, we'll do this, but we want a 12-year deal. And they got the 12-year deal. So they're a bit hamstrung in terms of what they can do from a business standpoint with a brand new television deal that's in play that their presidents and their commissioner agreed upon.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, the only way for the ACC to to get greater revenue, I think, would be to have Notre Dame as a full-time league member, and that I don't see that happening. I don't see Jack Swarbrick doing that on the basis of his decision to be okay with being no better than number 5 in a college football playoff with 12 teams. When he did that, that enabled the 12-team concept to go into play, and he did it because he gets an additional home game. You know, by being no better than 5th, if he has a great season, then he gets a home game, whether he finishes 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th. If Notre Dame fell into any one of those categories, they get an additional home game. And that's what Notre Dame's been missing, is that one, that one crucial extra game, because they didn't have a conference championship like everybody else. They can't go Big Ten because they signed the grant of rights. So Notre Dame is either going to be an independent or they're going to be in the ACC up until 2035, I think, something like that. So I think probably the conference in the most difficult position as it relates to football and revenue moving forward is the ACC.
Yeah, definitely. It's just, yeah, with the ACC, and who knows what's gonna, really happen there.
Mm-hmm.
That. When you look at, let me add one more thing. I gotta ask you. I noticed that so with college football coming up, and your trips to Ann Arbor or something. I've been asking a lot of experts about what Michigan's gonna do and all this stuff, and because everybody's always enamored about what Michigan's gonna go do this year. And all that. So what do you think happens in Ann Arbor this year?
Man, that's a great question. I just did a Big Noon digital show last week with Joel and Rob Stone and Bruce Feldman, and the question came up, who's going to rebound off of last year's bad COVID season, Penn State or Michigan? And I think that's a simple question that's easily answered. Penn State is the answer.
Yeah.
They get Clifford back. They've got quality skill people. They lost their best defender who opted out, who's coming back. Micah is returning. So, they got a lot of talent at Penn State, and I think have consistently recruited better than anybody other than Ohio State. So James Franklin, I think, they lost a tough game, a debatable finish there with Indiana at the start, which was tough, got them reeling. Then they lost Journey Brown for, an entire season, and Journey Brown was a real leader for that team. I think that had them reeling as the season progressed. I think Penn State can flip the switch and get back into graces very quickly, and we'll find out, because they play Wisconsin right out of the gates in a big game, a conference game for them very early in the season, and the first week, September the 4th. So if they win that game, and then you look at their schedule, it sort of sets up for them to make a run. A lot of pressure, I think, on Michigan to find a way to get some impact wins. But when you change your staff across the board as often as Jim has changed his staff, I think it becomes very, very difficult against the schedule that you have to play in that division. He's got the new contract, and to his credit, he was accepting of it, didn't fight it at all, which I think it endears him to Michigan people. They feel like, okay, well, we've invested the 7 years, and we haven't gotten what we wanted. I don't know that Jim investigated his NFL opportunities, but I don't think there were really any there. Most of his staff that was part of his 49ers team, they're off with other teams and have been for quite some time. So I do get the feeling that this is Jim's, he's dug in, that this is what he's going to do. So it's almost like starting over. I think the Michigan people almost like to look at it as, year one. As crazy as that sounds, I mean, outside the Michigan footprint, that's what everybody's thinking is, my God, how can you let this go on? And the Michigan people are like, well, he's our guy, and and so their feeling is things were so bad, and we were so unhappy with the coaches that didn't fit in here, that didn't want to do it the Michigan way.
Yeah.
At least Jim represents that we're trying to do it the Michigan way. But to answer your question, they may struggle to be over 500. I mean, they may, because the rest of the league is pretty good.
Yeah.
Better than people think. Ohio State separated themselves. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But the rest of the league, whether we're talking Minnesota, which I think is another bounce back team.
Yeah.
They had COVID issues that troubled them, but I think that's a really good football team. We'll find out again early with them. Indiana's not going away. Okay. Tom Allen's got a sound program now. And then you look at Iowa, what Kirk's done through the years, Wisconsin, over on the other side, on the other division, man, Bielema coming into Illinois, I think might be a decent fit.
Yeah.
I think the league itself, the Big Ten, is actually a lot better than people realize. The problem is that Ohio State is so much better than everybody else in terms of their personnel, 4 and 5 star recruiting. And then when they get pummeled by Alabama, the thinking is, well, the Ohio State is great and they're yards ahead of everybody else in the Big Ten, but they still can't hold up against whoever the SEC throws at them. I mean, that's the perception. Doesn't mean it's reality, but that is the perception now. And that's the problem the Big Ten takes from an image standpoint. But as someone that's covered the Big Ten a lot in the last handful of years, I think there's a lot of reason for optimism about the conference. The problem is not so much in Michigan. Michigan's still trying to find their way. They have not created an identity. Don Brown's defense with the Viper and all that had an identity for a couple of years there with Jim, but they got smoked when they played Ohio State. Well, last year they lost some of their personnel, still tried to play that style, and you saw what happened.
Yeah.
So now Brown's out. You got a new defensive coordinator. From an offensive standpoint, it's just been piecemeal, it seems, from year to year. They just need to get some consistency so that they can build whatever the identity is going to be. Jim has failed to create that. He hasn't created the culture or the identity that he was able to create at Stanford. That's the thing that kind of is bizarre about it. He did a hell of a job at Stanford and really built it up to something very special when he left it.
Yeah.
And it's carried on since, obviously, with David Shaw. But he's not been able to do that at Michigan, which is a real head scratcher, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest mysteries out there. But he wants to see once the season starts. You got Washington coming up that second week, and then you got on the road at Wisconsin, going to Michigan State, and another team that they lost to. So, and then
they the record versus rivals is how many people could have endured that and held on to their jobs. I mean, Jim is Jim, and because of his pedigree and what he accomplished and being a Michigan guy and ensconced in that community, I think that has saved the day for him. But I will say, I noticed at the Big Ten Media Days, just watching from a distance, that he's got a better handle in terms of dealing with the media.
Yes.
In this position that he finds himself in. He had, that level of bravado, sort of false bravado in the beginning.
Yeah.
And I didn't think it played very well. He appears to have dealt with what issues he's had. he's been humbled. And I see a guy right now that understands the position that he's in, and that he's realistic about how to dig himself out of it. So it sends the signal to me that he has the support of his university and all of the movers and shakers in the university, that he knows he's got plenty of time, but now he's got to set the foundation and get it done right. And I noticed how coaches handle media in terms of their comfort zone and how real they can be. I've known Jim a long time. I've not always agreed with him. We've been at odds on occasion, but I do think that he's got a better handle now on where they are. And that old saying about you're never going to get to where you want to go unless you know where you've been.
Yeah.
And I think he knows where he's been now, and he's trying to address it and begin again. I think this is a begin again season for Harbaugh.
Yeah, definitely going to be interesting to watch it all year long. Well, Timmy B, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us about college football, and of course about Bobby Bowden as well. And we'll see you when we see you on College Football on Fox.
Yeah, we start September the 4th. We've got Texas and Louisiana. The Raging Cajuns are loaded. They return their quarterback. Billy Napier turned down Auburn and South Carolina in the offseason. He's making $2 million per. That's huge for a Sun Belt program. And it's Sark's opener, in Texas. Talk about pressure. That'll be a fun one on September the 4th. Then the 11th, Spencer and I will be at USC on the commemoration of the 20th anniversary of 9/11 for USC and Stanford.
Yep. In
a late night game on Fox. And then I'll be coming up to the Horseshoe on the 18th for the Tulsa game with Ohio State. So we got it's a great life when you get to open in Austin, then go to the Coliseum in LA, and then to the Horseshoe of the banks of the Olentangy. That's a pretty good start the first 3 weeks.
Yep. Yeah, that sounds good. All right. Good to see you, Timmy B.
Thank you, Casey.